Hey, so in my previous video, I answered 5 really fundamental questions about how to approach your level design portfolio work and help yourself apply for your first jobs in the industry. I thought it'd be useful to complement that by showing you my portfolio piece that I applied for my first jobs with back in 2007. And while that might seem like a really long time ago and like I'm old and things have changed since then, in my opinion, things haven't really changed. You know, the skills and the principles that you're trying to show through your portfolio work is pretty much the same stuff. The video is about 5 minutes long, and I'm going to give a commentary throughout the video and talk about why I made certain decisions and approached it in the way I did. And then afterwards I'll come back and give a summary of some tips and advice to take away. Here it is. So this video I'm showing you is actually the same video that I made back at university to show the project off to my lecturers at the time. As you can see, I've made this in Half-Life 2, and it was a solo project, which I did over, I think, 6 to 9 months, but alongside a bunch of other modules that I also had to work on. One of the main things I'd like to get across in this video is how much better your level design work can be if you work with level editors for existing games instead of using game engines like Unreal or Unity. In this case, having all of the mechanics and the content and the tools that Valve used to make Half-Life 2 enables me to make something that feels fully playable and finished and show that I've been through the entire creative process. So this level starts with you joining some rebels in a fight against some Combine guys in the streets, but really all the combat you're seeing at the moment is just building up to what this level is really about, which is a Strider encounter, which starts now. For some context, back when I was working on this level, Half-Life 2 Episode 1 and 2 had just came out, and they pushed the Half-Life games further into the domain of being driven by strong narrative sequences and big action set pieces. I remember realizing at the time that that's what these games are about, and that's what I should do in my portfolio work. I should make it about set pieces. And so I went for the Strider because, as the biggest enemy in the game, it's kind of the shortest route to something that feels cool and dramatic and memorable. I was also very influenced by the film Children of Men, which had just came out the year before and I loved. There's a sequence in that involving a tank attacking a building, which this has a lot of parallels to. So now the player finally has the means to fight back at the Strider with the RPG, and it's supposed to be the kind of gameplay climax of this whole section, but in the end it's quite underwhelming, I think. All I'm really doing is grabbing the rocket launcher and running to the window and shooting at it, and just repeating this until it blows up. My original vision for this combat sequence was that the Strider uses its special attack, which I've shown earlier, to basically blow apart the side of the wall, the facade of the building that the player is in. And as a result, the fight gets more and more intense as it goes on because there's less and less cover for the player to use. But I fell into the classic game dev trap of running out of time because I underestimated how complicated things are and how long things would take. And the result is that I didn't get to finish things like this to the level of quality that I originally had in mind, which is something for you to bear in mind with your own portfolio work, you know. Try to keep your projects small so that you can finish them to a high quality. So now we're transitioning to part 2 of the project, and this is where I point out that this level is really long. It's basically 2 portfolio pieces worth of work presented as one huge piece. And I wouldn't recommend you do that. I think you can achieve a lot more and learn a lot more if you make 2 small projects rather than one really big one.
Ah, Gordon Freeman.
Let us through!
I am glad I made this section though. I'd say it's different enough to the first one and cool enough to add something to my portfolio and people's impression of me as a level designer. What I think is particularly valuable here is that it brings an element of dramatic surprise to this whole section. I'm a big believer that for games like Half-Life 2 and games that I like in general, it's really important for level designers to think about their work not just in terms of creating interesting gameplay challenges, but in terms of creating an experience that has a sense of drama and narrative. And both of those things benefit from having some interesting surprises along the way. Here I'm trying to convey the idea that the Combine guys that we dealt with in the last section swept through this area and mowed down these civilians before they could escape on the train. It's not exactly Shakespeare, but as well as adding visual interest, it does show that I'm thinking about things happening in these places before the player has arrived. And now we're finally at the end of the level, where as Gordon Freeman, the player steps onto an empty train, which maybe too conveniently seems to be there just for him. I remember the idea here was that I was trying to echo the themes of the main game, where you're kind of left wondering who Gordon is and what his role is in the story in relation to the G-Man. And that's how the level ends. Okay, so that was the video, and here are 5 closing thoughts to finish up with. Number 1 is that, like I say, I used the level editor for an existing game for this, and I think that helps massively. A lot of people, when I've mentioned that, they ask, isn't Half-Life 2 a bit of an old game? And is that still going to be relevant in my portfolio? And I always answer, yes, it is absolutely just as relevant today, because whether the game is new or not, the skills and the principles that you're showing, like I said, are still very relevant. I'm still showing gameplay scripting, 3D layout design, NPC behavior kind of scripting, and lots of creative decisions about how I set up situations with those scripting tools. So all of that stuff is still just as relevant. And if you don't use a tool that allows you to show all that stuff, then you're really kind of holding yourself back with your portfolio work. Point number 2 is the environment art thing. Like I say, it was a solo project and I did the whole thing myself, but I built it using the art assets that come with the game, Half-Life 2. So I didn't make any models myself, and while I did kind of spend some time to make it look nice, it wasn't the priority of the project. And you don't really need to make it look as nice as I did. You should just really focus on the level design and ensuring that you've got finished, fully playable gameplay situations on show. Number 3 is scope. Like I said, the project is bigger than it needs to be. I don't recommend you do a project as big as that. It would be much better to make 2 smaller projects that show different skills and that you can finish more efficiently. I only did that because I knew I had kind of the whole year, really, to do my final project in, and I'd made Half-Life 2 levels before, so I knew that I could be quite ambitious with it. But even then, like I say, certain things like the Strider encounter were not as finished as I would like them to be because I ran out of time and spread myself a little too thinly. So yeah, always bear in mind scope and try not to do more than you need to do, because quality is the priority, not scope and ambition. Point number 4 is about level scripting. For some reason, we tend to talk about level design with too much emphasis on layout design and creating blockouts of environments and stuff, and not talking about the content and the level design that we put into those blockouts. So it's really important that you show that you have done level scripting and that you can create fully formed, fully playable, interesting situations that happen inside your spaces, and you're not just designing empty spaces. And that kind of leads into point 5, which is think about what your portfolio work shows you can do and what it says about you as a designer. Bear in mind that by having a Half-Life 2 level in my portfolio, I wasn't just saying I will only work on games like Half-Life 2. More broadly than that, what it's saying are things like I like action games, I like single-player games, I like games that combine action and story, I can create 3D layouts and script complicated combat situations, all that stuff. And I've gone through the entire process myself, and I have that experience. Those are the kind of things that not only say things about who I am, but also apply to lots of different kinds of games, and therefore make you appealing to, hopefully, lots of different employers. So those are a few things to bear in mind relative to the gameplay video that I showed you of my portfolio work. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, whether it's about my portfolio work and the video I just showed you, or your own portfolio work, and any questions you might have about how to approach it. I'd be really happy to help with this stuff. I hope that was useful, and let me know. Cheers.